Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. A warm welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just waiting for all of you to come in because we have a very large number of participants tonight. We have a very exciting hour ahead of us. So let's just give it a few seconds for all of you to come in. And again, a very warm welcome to all of you. You are joining us for the European Research and Innovation Days in ASEAN 2021. And we have ahead of us a very exciting hour of an actual training workshop. And what we're looking at today is how to design think your research career. So if you don't know yet what that means and how it can help you, you will know in 60 minutes. So I think we can start. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Susanne Rensevasu. I am part of the EURAX's ASEAN team here in Southeast Asia, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Jenny Lind-Almaco, who is going to speak to you also in just a minute. Now, welcome to the European Research and Innovation Days ASEAN 2021. This is the flagship event of EURAX's ASEAN, and it is our platform for you, the researchers, the students, the innovators, the practitioners in Southeast Asia, to learn about the opportunities in Europe, to collaborate with European partners, to maybe spend some time of your research career in Europe, and to find partners when it comes to your own research projects and career development. This event started on the 1st of November, and we had really wonderful sessions, all under the topic of climate change, global health, and science diplomacy. And we've just started the third block, which is all about career development. So we have 7 sessions in total, where we have invited expert speakers like the lady who is going to teach you in just a minute, who will share their wisdom and their knowledge to make you better researchers. So we hope that you will find it beneficial, and we hope that you also maybe join us for the remaining 5 sessions in the next few days. Now, let me introduce you again to my colleague, Dr. Jenny Lind-Almaco, who will say a little bit about our speaker today. Jenny, please.
Thank you so much, Susanna, and thank you to everybody joining us. We're still having a lot of people, coming inside the room. So good afternoon. I think most of you are from ASEAN, but just in case there are spatterings of people coming from Europe as well, you are all welcome, any part of the world, and a good day to you. So I'm very excited for this session. For many reasons, but foremost of which is our known speaker today is a very good friend of mine. And I am one of those who's just like really awed at what she can do. She does everything, Susanne, even cook and bake and all that. But today we are going to learn from her about design thinking. So for those of you who are new to this, design thinking, also known as human-centered design, has been widely touted as an effective framework and process for innovation. This is perfect for EU Research and Innovation Days in ASEAN 2021. But the question that we want to ask today is it, however, applicable to one's career and even to one's own life? So Niña Terol, our speaker for today, Chief Marketing Officer and Entrepreneur in Residence at Talino Venture Labs. This is a global technology company that builds technologies and companies for, get this, and this is what I love about it, financial inclusion. And she will share valuable insights from global thought leaders and her own experience about how design thinking can be used to advance one's research career. So in the next hour, you will learn why it will be important to listen to yourself. Oh, I have to learn about this. I have to, definitely, Susanne, we have to listen to this too. And treat yourself as an ongoing experiment, how to prototype career choices and how to tell if you're on the right path. So Niña has had many hats. I mean, she's a communicator, a connector, a change maker, a creative catalyst with over 20 years of professional management and leadership experience, She is from the Philippines, but she is reading on a global level. So I'm very proud to introduce to her. And Nines, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny and Suzanne. So I see that many of those in the chat are from the ASEAN, but so is it good evening or good afternoon to many, right? Maybe there will be some who are still on good morning. So I know that this is the hour just before dinner for some of you, or maybe it's the end of a work day. So your energy is flagging. I'm going to try to keep your energy up. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me. So yeah, maybe just a quick temperature check before we begin. And by temperature check, I just want to ask a few questions and then type in the chat. So okay, I'm seeing that yeah, tiring day. Yes, I know. It's the days get longer and longer, especially with unlimited Zoom meetings, right? But we're gonna try to keep it light and fun, but still informative. I just wanted to check who here, hopefully your bosses are not in the same webinar and you can chat. Who here is thinking about a serious career change or a transition? And you can just type in the chat and just whatever, an emoji or a quick line, just for me to see what your actions. Yes, and I guess the reason why you're here is that you are thinking of that. So as they mentioned, we'll be talking about design thinking as a process and as a framework. So I'll also be sharing these slides with Jenny and Suzanne and the team, so that after this webinar, you'll still have access to the slides and you can use them for your purposes. Just don't use it to maybe share with my other colleagues that, hey, look, this is what she said about you. No, I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to be taking you through some personal insights and parts of my journey. So great. Okay. There are some who are teaching. Yes. Some emojis. Okay, great. So I'm going to get started and I'm going to share my slides. If at any point you need me to slow down a bit, because I get really excited when I speak, you can please let me know. So let me just present my slides. Okay. So before that, an unofficial plug to Canva. Anyone here who's using Canva and anyone here from Canva, I just love the platform. So do check it out. Okay. So we're going to learn today, as they mentioned, about a few things. So I'm going to start with a bit of a confession and a story. Hopefully it will inspire you as well. We're going to talk about design thinking, and then we'll go into things you can do to design think or to apply design thinking to your own research career. I'll give you a case study, which I have to admit is myself. And then we'll give you some additional guide questions and thought starters that are really meant for you. And then I have 3 recommended books that I've used, and I really think more people should read and try out. Okay, so let me just go back. Okay, so first, my confession and my story. So yes, I am a chief marketing officer for a global technology company. I have no tech background and I have very little tech marketing experience. So how on earth did I get here? I do feel imposter syndrome, but I can assure you I try to do a good job every single day. But the fact is, it took an interesting journey for me to get here. And I'll share a bit of a story to illustrate how I got here, just to get your creative juices flowing and see how you might be able to apply that in your own career. So this is what my road to tech looked like. I started my career over 20 years ago when I was about 6. Of course, that's a joke. So started my career over 20 years ago in a telco. I was marketing landlines. Some of you might be too young to remember what a landline or that kind of phone with a handset and real wires. So that's not a headset. So that's what I started marketing very early in my career. And then I decided, I don't want to market phones. I want to change the world. And I moved to a nonprofit, which I really enjoyed. And that's where I really got into the expertise that I have now, which is communications and marketing communications and a lot of that. I soon needed, so this was out of necessity. My parents' careers had gone into a bit of a crisis. I had to step up as the eldest sister. We Asians do that for our families. I had to step up, set up a business of my own to be able to support my younger brother. So I set up an editorial design firm because I loved writing, loved magazines, loved design. So I did that, really went out on a limb and set up my own business. That was good until I started getting a bit politically active because of the situation in the Philippines, and I became an active political advocate and blogger. And then I got invited to join government. It was a turning point for my career. This was 2009. And I was invited to head communications for a senator who's now running for vice president. So for those of you in the Philippines, I used to work in Senator Kiko Pangalinan's office. I used to head his communications team. And at the time, I was asked to head something at the time called new media. So some of you might have heard that term. This was referring to digital media, and because it was such a new thing. They were used to dealing with newspapers and traditional media broadcast, but social media, what was that? And it was my job to bring that office up to speed. And I'm really glad that assignment was given to me because it also enabled me to test things out and experiment. During my time in government, I kid you not, we live streamed rock concerts promoting voter registration. This was in 2009. There was no Facebook Live, and we were live streaming concerts using a plugged-in internet dongle. So you can imagine the really sad speeds at which we were streaming, but we were actually doing that. And there was a time when we were even carrying along a satellite, a portable satellite with us as we were doing concerts around the country for voter registration and voter education, and doing what we could with the very little technology we had. Thankfully, also, we were the first legislative office to really go on social media. We were tweeting just as heavily as the journalists were. And we actually were the office that pushed for live streaming of all Senate sessions so that anyone from anywhere in the Philippines will be able to watch what was going on in the Senate at all times. For our colleagues in other countries, this is equivalent to your parliament. So this was a big thing. And again, it was a career changer for me because of the innovations we had done at that time with whatever little tiny resources we had. And I had a team of 4 very young, scrappy, guerrilla marketing type people. So from that, I again had to move. There was a personal crisis. So again, I usually make big career shifts during a crisis. There was a personal crisis that compelled me to move back to the private sector. And I moved into the renewable energy space because I said, once you work in government, and you still have that idealism of wanting to serve your country, you want to do something, big things for the planet. So I said I wanted to work in a space where I could continue to create social impact. And that was renewable energy until I got poached to head corporate affairs for the largest advertising company in the Philippines. And again, it wasn't an area I was used to. If you see this whole roadmap, until one day there was a crisis involving our agency and a government agency, and I had to be the spokesperson. And all of a sudden, everything I knew from my government days just came back, and I was able to apply that. But as early as my government days, I knew that I wanted something bigger than just my background in communication. So my background throughout all of this has always been a lot of writing, a lot of communications and advocacy. I would also run workshops on the side. I would teach on the side. I taught in university for a semester. I was always mentoring. So all of these things, but I knew that I wanted something more. I didn't want to just write. I didn't want to just be a spokesperson. I didn't want to just teach. I wanted to actually do. I wanted to be part of the innovations that I was teaching or espousing. So I quit my advertising job, and there's a backstory to that, which you'll learn more about later. And then I set up an innovation consulting company until I also got poached for this job now as chief marketing officer of technology company. So what does that have to do with design thinking? You're gonna see later on, but you'll see that at least some insights from my own career was that I very early on in my career, I knew that it wasn't going to be a ladder. I wasn't going to stay in one company and stay there for 20 years and wait for retirement. I was looking at it as a journey, and at each step I was picking up new tools for my arsenal, right? So you're learning and improving and growing your arsenal by the day. So by now I could say I've worked in media, in government, in energy, in telco, in technology, in so many spaces that it becomes easier to learn new things as you go along. And that was me. I always entered unfamiliar territory. For some reason, I always got recruited or got somehow moved or got compelled to shift to something new that was very unfamiliar for me. And I had to learn on the job. I had to learn by doing. There was no time to study, although there would be workshops and online courses on the side, but you had to do it as you were doing the job. I was always thrust in leadership positions for some strange reason, and I guess now it's clear to me that there's a mission behind all of this, and behind being asked to lead teams that are new to you. But I also always asked, so why not this? What if we could do this, and why don't we try this? And again, going back to my government example, that's how we got my former boss to start tweeting. He actually asked me one time in 2009, okay, what is this Twitter and how do I use it? And from the time on, he's just become a completely hooked on Twitter. During our time, he also became the number 3 most influential political official on Twitter, according to some poll at the time. So it was a good time. We were able to really try things. And I realized about my own career that I was always enjoying myself and thriving in the intersection of ideas and social impact and innovation. It couldn't just be ideas and innovation without social impact, or it couldn't just be social impact. So it had to be a combination of that. And I'll ask you to keep that at the back of your head and think about your own career as we go into the next segment. Okay, and if you have any questions, I'll ask you to reserve them for, we'll make space for a Q&A, I promise you. So we'll now talk about design thinking. Now, design thinking, as Jenny mentioned in the introduction, it's really known to be an innovation process and framework. But for me, it's really become a way of life. I've treated myself as an active experiment. And I can tell you so many horror stories also about how things have gone wrong because of those experiments. But I'm still here. I'm still talking to you. And Jenny trusts me, so that's a good thing. And it's also called human-centered design because it really puts human beings, the users, at the heart, at the center of the process. It's not about the theory. It's not about the technology. It's not about the product. It's about the user. In this case, because we're design thinking your career, it's really about you. Not your parents, not your boss, not what society dictates you should do next. So this is, you will see many charts about design thinking, and it's very easy to search. I can also share with you a design thinking bootleg. They call it a bootleg, kind of like a digital workbook that was developed by Stanford University many years ago. So I'll share that along with the deck that I'll be sharing with Jenny. So we always start design thinking with empathy. And we'll move through that in a bit. You start with empathy, then you go through the phase called definition, then you ideate, then you prototype and test, then finally you launch. So it's a bit of a longer process, but it usually works really well because, again, you start by really knowing what the human beings at the center of the process are thinking and feeling and going through. It's also very iterative. So you will see that it's not a step. It's not a pyramid. The graphic is usually always a cycle, because after you implement or launch or implement your solution, then you go back again. How do you feel about it? What are you going through, etc.? How do you keep on improving? So it's an endless loop. And there's a favorite saying among design thinkers called, fail fast and learn fast. We hope not to fail as often, but in research, especially when you're conducting experiments, that you are bound to fail sometimes, right? And sometimes it's those failures that actually lead you to the breakthroughs, or they show you which theories and hypotheses aren't working, then you move on to the next. So it is also in design thinking. And I'm so excited to have researchers here, because actually empathy is the hardest part, I would say, of design thinking. It's the most critical and most crucial part, but I think this is also the best parts for researchers to contribute, or this is something that comes naturally to you, because in the empathy part of design thinking, you observe, you listen, in your case, because this is about you feel and you understand, and this is really about putting yourself in the shoes of the user. So if we were doing this for something else, it's about the user. How do you design think a chair, let's say for an orthopedic chair for seniors? You have to feel what they feel. You have to feel their pains. You have to know what it's like, or designing something. If you're designing something for a pregnant woman, you have to know, what does it feel like to carry that heavy load, or the times when it hurts her back, or many things. So whenever you're designing, you're always putting the user in front. And then you really have to use all your senses. So I'll show you some tools that we will use. And again, when I share with you the Stanford design thinking bootcamp bootleg, you'll have more tools at your disposal. There's what we call immersions. They're called something else, but I use immersions in the workplace. It's what I also had when I went to school and had to go through some go into communities to understand what other communities how they were living and what they were feeling like. So you go through immersions, which are really deep dives into how a user behaves in a particular situation. So for example, in a non-career context, in our case, when we were designing one of our inclusive fintech startups, and we were designing financial apps for micro and small and medium enterprise owners in rural areas in the Philippines. We really went there for 3 days. We lived where they lived. We also took showers. No, there were no showers. Took really cold baths at 4 a.m. just like them. Went to work with them. Walked to work with them, and really went about their day so we could better understand how does a mother in the rural parts of the Philippines go about her day, and how does a small loan come into play, and how can an app like ours make her life better. So we had to do that to really understand our users so that we never make assumptions. The next is, you conduct interviews, and I can imagine some researchers would be particularly great at this. Journalists are also great at interviews. So this is where you're able to get insights from other people or your users. Later we'll talk, and here in the next part, journaling is something that you can particularly use, especially if we're talking about you and your career. You might want to keep a journal, even something informal or something digital, to be able to take note of your habits, your behaviors, your triggers, your actions, and just how you're feeling about certain things. Role playing is also an effective tool, because even if it's just, for play or pretending, when you're thrust into the shoes of another person, you suddenly have to think about, okay, yeah, so how would a blind teenager interact with the world, and if I were to play the role of a blind teenager, how would I feel, right? So you suddenly feel very differently if you were role playing. So that would be for empathy. Now for definition, definition is also really hard. And I know I said empathy is the hardest, but okay, I'll correct myself. Definition is actually harder, because what usually happens in a design thinking process is that when you go into your deep dive into the empathy part, you come out with a lot of data. And I know researchers love data, but I think, well, for me, when I was doing, my own research projects in university, the thing I hated the most was organizing the data, because there would be so much, right? You hate it in the middle, but there's a eureka moment at the end, and there's insight and clarity. That's what the definition portion is all about. From all of the notes that you gather or that you took during the empathy portion, you now have to look at are there patterns here? Are there themes that are happening? What are the key insights? And here is where you distill the right problem and you ask the right question. There is a book I mentioned here at the bottom called Designing Your Life. So that's one of the recommended books. When they talk about gravity problems, or I call it here a gravity question. So there are some questions that you probably shouldn't, or some problems you probably shouldn't try to mess around with anymore. For example, I want to be a poet, but I want to change the way poets make money. Before the age of NFTs and streaming on apps like Kumu or other platforms where you could gift really gifted poets online, you probably wouldn't have a solution to why do poets make so little money, and I want to change that. That's probably closer to a gravity question. They say that a gravity question is like gravity. It's there and you really can't do anything about it. So for example, another example of a gravity question or a gravity challenge that's career related is, I want to move up in my career, but I work in a family corporation, and you can only get to that level if you're part of the family. Well, unless you're actively dating someone in the family or are part of that family, then it's probably a gravity question for you. So that's probably not the right question to ask yourself, or the right challenge to give yourself, because it's never going to happen. So the important thing in the definition part of design thinking is reframing the question or reframing the challenge so that it's more actionable for you, it's more realistic, and therefore more doable. So we're going to give you some more tips later about how to do that for your career. The most fun part for me about design thinking is ideation. This is where you brainstorm, you explore, you collaborate, and you're really encouraged to not fall in love with your first idea, because there will be plenty of ideas. And you should really entertain as many ideas as possible. Go wild with your ideas, because no one's going to judge. And you shouldn't judge yourself either. So here are some tips on how to brainstorm or ideate better. So don't judge even yourself, because we know ourselves. We sometimes can be the harshest judges of ourselves, right? So don't judge any idea you come up with, and maybe don't share it with others first. Just do some internal processing on your own, and then accept any and all ideas, because later you could actually have fun with that. But maybe at a certain point, once you're more comfortable, collaborate to build on other people's ideas. In the technology space and innovation, you have to actively collaborate. And this time around, it's going to be okay to copy, borrow, steal, because you're just copying, borrowing ideas, even from other industries, right? So there's a classic case that they share in innovation where in trying to improve the efficiency of a group of surgeons, right? The precision and the accuracy and just how they work as a team. They actually studied the people in the F1 race pits. So Formula One is, one of the, I guess the top racing event in the world. So there are many F1 events. And if you would watch an F1 game, you would see how precise in very little time. You know, when a car comes into the pit crew immediately swoops in to fix everything that's needed in the car in a matter of seconds, because time is running for the race car driver. So that's how some surgeons actually decided to study you know, how they would perform better as a team by copying, borrowing, or stealing, you know, the methods of F1 car teams. So that's how you can also generate great ideas. Look everywhere for inspiration. And then prototyping and testing is interesting because this is where you actually build a tangible model of the solution you intend to develop. So this is where you know, from asking yourself, you ask yourself, how might we have a meaningful, or how might we have a global career while staying in my home country? Maybe that's one question you have. And then you're going to ideate, and then prototyping is going to be interesting because this is where you actually start putting real ideas together, and not just in your head, but in tangible form, maybe in the form of a draft, a concept paper, an outline, a flow chart, etc. In the technology space, we have to do, you know, wireframes and, you know, examples of mock websites and mock apps and all that. And my takeaway for the prototyping part of design thinking is, if you've built something perfect, then you've built it too late. Because prototyping is about building it fast and rough and raw. Sometimes when we prototype in the office, it's really just Post-its or, you know, pieces of paper, and you're just drawing the wireframes and you're drawing the flow chart and you're making sketches, and you're just testing people's reaction to it, so that, you know, you already discard the ideas that aren't working. And then if something is working really well, then that's the thing that you develop. You don't want to spend too much time developing something perfect early on, because that's not what this is all about. Prototyping is about building something to test it, get feedback. If it's going to be a failure, then it's okay. It's not going to break your heart. And then eventually, after all that, then you launch. You launch in product development. You launch a product. In restaurants or in the food business, you launch a new food item. In the service industry, you launch a service. In this case, you're gonna take new steps into a new career. So let's think about designing your research career, okay? But I'm gonna pause here just to check if there are any questions that I can answer now. I will check the chat. Okay. Thank you for the feedback so far. I'm gonna check the Q&A now. There's one question. Okay, I'm gonna read this now just to check. Okay, and maybe we can answer this now or later. Okay, so hi, Irini. Your question is an awesome career adventure. Yes, it has been awesome. Thank you. My question, for those of us who are currently working in a workplace that is unfamiliar with career changes, what would your advice to strategize the change, both for us and for the workplace we plan to leave? There were a few staff left in the current organization, but few people were remembered. Okay, I'm going to answer that later, but let's I hope it's okay. It'll be kept here, right, Jenny? So we'll answer that later, and I'll make sure we have time for that. So, okay, now when we think about design thinking your research career, here's how we're going to apply the steps. And I'll invite you to take notes or take a screenshot. But again, you're gonna have the slides anyway. So first is empathy. It's going to be very important to check in with yourself. And I pause here and I slow down because this is super important, and not enough of us in the world take enough time to actually check in with us. Very often, also because we have families who depend on our careers and our livelihood. Very often we go about our work days on autopilot. Right? There are certain things you do on a regular basis and you just do it, even no matter how you feel about it, even if it's upsetting you, even if it's making you sick, you do it because you need a paycheck. Now, we're not asking people to leave their jobs just yet, but here in the empathy part, it's really check in with yourself and ask yourself, honestly, how do you feel? And maybe it's, not how do you feel in general, but also how do you feel on certain days? How do you feel dealing with certain people? How do you feel doing certain tasks? So take note of that. And this is where journaling will actually come in handy. Or if you think journaling is too fuzzy, just take notes. Take notes on your computer or on your phone. But really think about, what are your pain points? What are the things that are not just that are really challenging for you for many reasons, and also check in with your body. There are some times when we actually have physical, visceral reactions to certain people or certain situations. If something is making you sick in the gut and you really feel it in your gut, then take note of that, because that's a warning sign, right? Or if you're getting migraines too often at work, or if you're calling in sick too much just because you're really stressed out, then those are warning signs you really should heed. But conversely, also think about, where are you most in a state of flow? Um, I I would point your attention also. I forgot to mention it here, but there's a really great talk about flow by, his name is Mikhaili. I just cannot, pronounce his surname, but we're gonna look it up, and I'll also send you the TED talk. But he was known, and he also just recently passed away. He was known as the father of flow, of the flow theory, because he was able to really articulate what it means when a person is in a state of flow. So also notice, when are you most in a state of flow? For me, I have to admit, I'm in a state of flow when I'm making presentations like this one, when I'm speaking to groups like I'm speaking with you now. I'd be even more in a state of flow if we were in an actual place and I could actually feed off your energy and I could see you guys, and we could laugh together and all that. So but take note of that, because those are clues to where you would also feel the most fulfilled in your career. But you also have to think about, what are your needs, right? A single person, a person who's single without any attachments will have different needs from a person like some of us here who have families to support, right? Or those with aging parents that we have to take care of, or children with special needs. So think about what your needs are as well. And you consider all of that in the empathy phase. And my encouragement for you is to, my recommendation is, when you're in this phase, maybe give yourself a few weeks, maybe even a quarter, if you have the luxury of time. If not, maybe at least 2 weeks, just to really, again, treat yourself as an experiment. You are the research subject. Document how that subject is feeling at certain points, and what are the trigger moments, what are the flow moments, right? What are the moments that are tense and where there's friction? Take note of that. And step back and do it in a more objective way without labeling the people around you. It's just, this is the subject, this is the situation, this is how the subject is feeling. I mean, for now, just try to be as objective as possible, but also really get in touch with yourself. Now, after all of that, you're going to have to distill all of that into, okay, so maybe these are the patterns. I feel most in pain this way. I'm most in a state of flow this way. This is what I really enjoy. And later, I'm going to show another chart to give you a good visual guide to see, how you could tell when you're probably in the right place. And in the definition part, then this is the part where you get to know your real problem. Do you have a capacity problem? Meaning you love your job, but you're just overworked. So, your question would probably be, how might we work more efficiently to work less hours in a day? Or maybe how might we have a more productive day? Yeah, maybe, yeah. How might we have a more productive day? Or how might we lessen burnout in the workplace? So something like that. You might also have a growth problem. You love your job, you love what you're doing, but you're stuck. Or maybe there's no place to go, right? So maybe the only place to go is out instead of up, because there's no up. Or maybe everyone above you are tenured and so senior, they're never going to leave until retirement. What do you do? So you have to really identify the problem. Sometimes it's a culture fit problem, right? Sometimes, there are people that are great, but just not right for the organization or the types of people around them. Sometimes you love the job, you love the company, you hate the boss you're directly reporting to. It happens. And there are studies that show that people leave managers. They don't leave jobs or they don't leave companies. So when you leave a company, often it's because of the person you're directly reporting to. So it happens as well. And you have to identify, is that your problem? Sometimes it's an economic problem. You love the job, you're just not being paid enough. And maybe they all, like in my case, when I was in the nonprofit, they couldn't afford to pay me more. So the only way I had to survive was to get out and start my own business. That's how it worked for me. Or it could also be a location problem, right? Some of us live away from our families, and the homesickness and the social costs of being away from the family is too much to bear. Then you need to find a job that's closer to home. Or it could be the other way around, where there are no jobs here that can compensate you well enough. And the only way to really move up is to move out of the country. So sometimes those would be the problems, right? So you have to ask yourself the right question. It shouldn't be just, oh, I want another job, or I want to resign, and then what's next? So really think about what your problem is. And it's you. It's not defined again by your parents, your spouse, partner, boss, friend, etc. And then you'll have to ideate. This is really fun. And in the book Designing Your Life, they actually recommend that you go on, you do some, they call it an Odyssey Plan. So you think of 3 alternative career paths, right? So 3 very different scenarios, and you map that out. What if you took this path? What would happen? And then what would happen, right? And you try to imagine yourself taking that path and those journeys to also be able to envision, okay, yeah, what would life be like if I became maybe a researcher in university instead of a corporation, or if I maybe became a researcher for a political think tank, or if I became a researcher for a huge conglomerate, what would my life be like? And then you play that out and you just ideate, and to see also how you feel, again, how you feel about the ideas, right? And then what changes will bring you closer to that. So just keep on ideating. And at this phase, no idea is a bad idea. Okay. And then we're going to prototype. And by prototyping, so here are some examples, right? You take tangible baby steps. You set up informational interviews. This means sometimes you just reach out to, let's start with friends, who are in the same space, ask about what it's like there, or, really just try to get as much information about the company or the role. So preferably from somebody who already is in the same role that you want to be in, just to try to get more information. Or maybe you can pilot a small side project. Or sometimes there are international organizations opening up posts for independent contractors, and you can get a small project. So you can try what it's like to be in that organization, and then you decide if it's something that's working out for you or not. At least it's, it entails some commitment, but not too much commitment. You can also volunteer, intern, or mentor for a company. That's something I did, which I'll share more about in a bit. And again, prototyping and testing go hand in hand. So when you're prototyping, again, you test. This time, you're also the tester. How do you feel about this? Once you've spoken to somebody and they've shared insights about the industry you want to enter, then you ask yourself, okay, maybe not for me. Or yeah, okay, I'd like to explore this. Let's take the next step, right? Or after working on a small project, is this something you want to do a lot more of or a lot less of? And again, it's important to be honest with yourself. And then, boldly take the next step. Like make the first move. Jenny and I are working on a movement called "Girl Make the First Move." So here, girl or boy, or whatever your noun or your pronoun is, just make the first move, and boldly take the next step. But always remember that in design thinking, there's a saying called "always in beta," which means you're always on test mode. You're never the perfect final version, right? You're always improving. So I know we don't have so much time. So let me just give you a quick case study, which again involves my life. You saw the map earlier, and this was how I applied the steps of design thinking. I have to admit, I did not knowingly apply it at first, but as I got to learn more about design thinking, I became more intentional about designing my life. So it all started, this was about 2013. I got invited by a friend to an event called Geeks on a Beach, Startups Text Design in a Beach. And at this time, I was still working in government. And I was like, this looks like a really great idea. So I filed for a holiday, took a leave, went to this event, and I had no idea what I was gonna find, except that it was gonna be startups text design on a beach. Hey, that could be a cool way to spend my vacation, because I often don't take breaks. I like to mix networking and learning while I'm on break, because I'm a nerd that way. So yeah, I went to this event and I just fell in love with the scene. I fell in love with the energy, the ideas. I had no idea what they were talking about, but I was enjoying meeting people and just getting to know what the space was about. This ran for 5 years. So I actually went to 4 out of 5 of these, always on my holiday, always just trying to learn without having been in the technology industry. So remember, this was still in government. This was about 9 years ago. So far back in my journey. And then this sparked my curiosity. So at this point, you would consider this in the empathy phase. It was really sparked by curiosity. And my question was, what's it like to work in a technology startup? What's it like to work in this world? And then when I moved into, so we'll go into the upper section of the slide, when I moved back into the private sector from my stint in government. And again, because of the work I had done, which was very, as I mentioned, career changing for me. And it really opened a lot of doors. This was in about 2015, I got invited to start being a mentor at Founder Institute, which is one of the world's largest accelerators for startups. So I became a mentor. I would also teach sessions just like this one, and I would just do it over and over and over again. And these are not really paid sessions. You would get paid in equity, like in 0.0 something percent of the startups you were mentoring, and they often did not really reach big heights. So it was really just to get more into the space, and because I knew that because of my background, I had something to contribute. Startups needed marketing and communications information. I wanted to know more about startups, so I did this, and I'm still doing it. So I'm on my 6th, going on 7th year as a mentor in the Founder Institute. Then I also started getting involved. I was asked to be a judge for a number of years, also for what was called the ASEAN Rice Bowl Startup Awards. And again, I wasn't a startup person. I was a communications and marketing person, but I said yes because I just love this space. Again, no compensation. You would just get freebies, just go out to parties, and that was fine. I think the pivotal moment for me was when I really found a strong itch. And again, I was listening to myself. I was so restless. I really wanted to dive into innovation. And there was an opportunity. I applied. I got into 2 programs, but the program I really wanted was one from the Goldsmiths, from Goldsmiths University of London. It was a master's in innovation and innovation management, I think. And I had also applied for a Chevening scholarship. So this is the UK government scholarship. So I got into the program, but I was waitlisted for Chevening, and they said, this is great, etc. But we cannot offer you a spot. But if somebody does leave, then you get a spot. But at the time, I was also really discerning, and I'm quite religious. So I prayed and I said, okay, if I get the scholarship, then I will go, no questions asked, right? But if the answer is no, then it means I'm just meant to build my career some way else. Also, because friends had advised me against it. My friends who were entrepreneurs were saying, if you want to innovate, don't study innovation, you do innovation. So I didn't get the scholarship, and therefore I set up a business called Kickfire Kitchen, which went into innovation consulting. And all the while, I was still mentoring and judging and doing all of that, taking other courses on the side. But not this time, we were also certified facilitators of the Lego series play method. So you see a lot of Legos here. But we then I started getting more into the doors of companies that were actually doing innovation. So I was getting a peek into this. Was like my prototype already, and I even had a huge board on by my bed where I wrote about prototyping my purpose. And I told myself I'm going to make my own master's degree. For those of you who know the term DIY, I said I'm going to DIY my own master's degree. I'm going to take the Goldsmiths curriculum, kind of loosely based on that. I'm going to study whatever I can from that curriculum, whether it's online or just by mentoring or whatever. And then I'm going to dive into it. And then I'm going to learn to innovate, not by studying, but by actually doing it. And that's also what I started doing when I set up the business. And then eventually, when Talino got me, it became the combination of everything that I was looking for. So all of a sudden, I remember I was even prototyping. Okay, the Goldsmiths curriculum does not have product design or UX UI. So I made a note to myself. UX UI means user experience and user interface design. So I said, study UX UI. When I got my job at Talino, I did not have to study UX UI. I had to be part of it. I had to actually do it, on a regular basis. And again, I just had to learn by doing. So that was my process. Okay. And here's something I'm going to leave with you to know whether you are in the right spot. So some of you might be familiar with this. It's a Japanese concept called Ikigai. It's also called, your life purpose or your life mission. And for me, the Ikigai is really the intersection of all of these things. So you have to ask yourself, or you have to think about what are the things you love to do, right? So in my case, everything I'm doing now, to be honest, I love to do, except for admin work. I hate admin work. So I have teammates who do that for me, but everything else I love. But thankfully some people actually love admin work. So they have that here. I don't, but so I love what I do. And then what does the world need? So in your case, in your particular research field, also think about, especially now, we have an ongoing healthcare crisis. We have so many displaced people. We have economic crises, but the world is also shifting. People are now talking about artificial intelligence and blockchain, and then the future of work. People are talking about basic income, etc. So, what does the world need more of, and what can be your role in it? So think about that, right? And the combination of what you love and what the world needs is a mission. But a mission is often very purpose oriented, but it doesn't pay the bills. So here's where you think about what you can be paid for, right? So think of what you're really good at that you can be paid for, that you can earn as a living, right? So if it's what the world needs and it's what you can be paid for, it's a vocation. But if it's what you're good at, I mean, you can be a really good accountant and you can be paid for being an accountant. Then being an accountant is your profession. But it might not necessarily be your passion, because your passion is what you're good at and what you love. So in my case, doing stuff like this, teaching and mentoring, and again, the work that I do, I also love it. And thankfully, I think people think I'm good at it. But the Ikigai, like the intersection of all that. So the ideal scenario is when you meet all of these. So it's what you love, it's what the world needs, you're good at it, but you're also paid for it. This is the ideal scenario though. You will not get there right away. You will not get here. And sometimes it will fluctuate. So it's okay. So this is an ideal, the ideal scenario to strive for. I mean, it's okay if you don't, if you're not there, but just be conscious and mindful that, there could be something, there could be a way to put this all together. And always, always remember to think about what you can be paid for. I think there are some similar diagrams of this where they talk about your purpose, and they leave out the paid part. But, we got to pay the bills. Some of us have kids to feed and parents to take care of, and the water and the electricity is not going to be paid by love. So you need to think of the combination of all of this. I know that we do want to, I will want to check if we have time for some questions. So I'll just leave some thought starters. We're not going to go into these in detail. I'll flash just here. I'll really ask you to think about, often because we go on autopilot, we think that the next big thing or the career goal is a promotion or a pay increase. But if you just set that aside, think about your career goals aside from compensation and a promotion. Then, that's also where the creative juices start flowing, right? And really be honest with yourself about what motivates you. Some people are motivated by money, and that's okay. Some people are motivated by service, and that's okay. We're not here to judge what motivates you. But the important thing is, again, empathy for yourself. Check back and really know what really motivates you. And then when you think about your career issues, again, let's think about reframing. So instead of thinking about, oh, I'm so overworked, and this is also me. I'm overworked. I'm working sometimes. I work 18 hours a day, etc. So maybe instead of asking, or maybe instead of thinking about leaving your job because you're overworked, maybe you can think about, how might we design a healthier work-life balance so that I can have a healthier life and be more productive while staying in a job I love, right? And again, just going back to Arini's question, how do you, for example, how do you strategize the change both for you and for a workplace that you plan to leave? I guess my quick answer here, Arini, is I would encourage you to think about yourself first. I know it's natural for us to think about what other people will think and they might think, but those other people at work, once you leave that organization behind, they're not going to pay your bills. They're not taking care of your family. So think about you and your needs. Of course, try to be as compassionate as possible, do the job really well so that the time you plan to leave, make sure that everything is in order. Turn over everything properly, transition everything properly. Try not to, make any big enemies and burn any bridges when you leave that organization. But once you've left them, then you've left them behind. Think about yourself and your needs and your family and put that front and center. And really, everything else is just noise. So try not to think of the noise around you. There's another question here that I'll answer now. So I'm finding it difficult to find a research job in development. I have experience as a data analyst in corporate, then decided to work in grassroots development. Oh, wow. However, I've been feeling insecure about my career change because of the challenges in job hunting. I feel like I'm inexperienced in both sectors. I feel you. I know what that's like, to have experience in both, but you feel like you're not as ripe for both sides. What should I do to feel more confident as I look for job opportunities? Thank you for the feedback on my talk. And it's very normal to feel this way. So I would recommend that, again, take a step back And also take note of the things that you had done really well. So in both sides, right? You were a data analyst in corporate, and then you were in grassroots development. So take stock of your wins or your achievements in the data analyst side, and then take stock also of your wins or your strengths in the grassroots development side. You might also want to take tests like Strengths Finder or some of those other tests just to understand yourself better. And then the next time you apply for a job, you really package your strengths. I would also suggest, don't look for a particular job. Look for a role, not a particular job title, but look for a role, and therefore package yourself for a role that mixes your corporate and your nonprofit work, but also highlights your strength in maybe data analysis, right? So it doesn't matter if it's private or nonprofit. Whatever strengths you have, those are transferable. And I encourage you to really highlight that the next time you apply for a job. So in this case, if you knew that you would not fail, what would you do, or at least try? Now that I'm in the startup space, I really have no regrets. I'm glad I made the shift. It's been really tough. It's been a really tough almost 3 years since I started, to be honest, because the pace is so fast. We work really long hours. We work in different time zones. It's really hard building a product remotely. But at least when I look back at my chart, at this chart of mine, then I know what I see for myself here, right? But you're gonna have to think of that for yourself, and you're gonna have to ask yourself, what would you do? At least try, and then you can say, okay, I've tried it. Again, treat your life as an ongoing experiment. This also means treating yourself and your life with a lot of humor, because you're going to fail a lot. You're going to make really bad decisions. And the important thing here is to have a healthy sense of humor so that you can just laugh at yourself and say, oh, okay, that experiment didn't work. Okay, next. I know we have families to think about. So many of our families in Asia worry about, us losing face if we fail in a business, or, we're competing with our siblings for the title, or you're trying to impress your parents. I know that's hard to remove, but I would really encourage you to just think about yourself first, and then think about the impact, of course, on others around you. But this is your career, right? So I encourage you to really design your career around what's good for you, because if it's good for you, it's going to make you a happier person. They're also going to be happier to be around you, because nobody wants to be around a miserable person. I can tell you that. And just as a thought experiment, and so we are still in the midst of a pandemic, and we don't really know how long we'll be on this earth, right? So just think about, what would you regret not doing if you knew you have only a year left on this earth? For me, to be honest, I have yet to write a book, and I get so I get so agitated when I see friends of mine publishing books, and I'm like, I know I'm a good writer. I haven't published a book yet. And my partner reminds me, well, to have a book, you gotta write a book, right? So I mean, he's right. If I want to publish a book, I have to start writing it, and I haven't started writing. So but yeah, so that's one thing I will really regret. So I will have to really make time to write something. And speaking of books, here are 3 books I highly recommend. So I first started with this one. I bought my copy a few years ago. It's got a lot of notes and sticky notes and all that. So whether it's paperback or Kindle or, a digital copy, please check it out. Try out the exercises. It's going to be very illuminating, I think. This is the next one, designing your work life. So in designing your life, it really can be about anything, including relationships. And designing your work life, of course, is just really about your career. Written by the same authors. So Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, they're Stanford professors who actually teach a course of exactly this title called Designing Your Life. So I highly encourage that you check that out. And then Ikigai is where, again, we talk about that graphic I showed you earlier. But this is a really nice read about how the Japanese people in particular, practice or some concepts around Ikigai, what they do to be able to stay healthy and in touch with, those different parts of themselves to make them, more whole. And I really enjoyed it. And this is one book I'm actually going to be passing around to friends. It's really a good read. So, and this is how you'll stay in touch with me. So I mentioned earlier, Jenny and I are also working on a movement called Girl Make the First Move. So I also encourage you to please check that out. It's a work in progress. Again, it's a prototype, if you might call it that. It's a prototype for something bigger, but it had to get started, right? So this is how you'll find me on LinkedIn. It's just plain Niña Terol. Instagram, Twitter, although I don't tweet so much. And yeah, this is pretty much where it ends. So I'm going to stop here and then I'm going to check how much time we have for questions. And thank you so much for all the comments. You've really made my day. This is now my 15th, no, my 14th, yeah, my 15th hour of the day. But I'm so happy to be here. Okay, let's check if there's anything else in the Q&A. So we've answered Irini's question. I hope that was helpful. For the anonymous attendee, again, I hope it's been helpful, but thank you again for the feedback. Now just checking the chat as well. Let me, thank you. Thank you so much for all your feedback. So you're gonna get a copy of that deck. And please do check out the readings. I will also send Jenny the file of the design, the bootcamp bootleg by Stanford D School, and the TED talk on I think how to find your state of flow or something like that. All right, and okay, Mr. Deocaris of Radyo Aguila. Oh, love it. Okay. Yeah, yes, please. I will connect. I'm gonna copy your message and then I'm gonna get in touch with you separately. I'm not sure if Radyo Aguila is connected to the Atenean anyway, but I'm an Atenean, so thank you. All right, so just checking. Okay, there's an interesting question here from Sneha. From prototyping to launch phase, how do you ensure the perfection? Okay, this is an interesting question. Just quickly, I'm going to say, number one, oh, sorry, I think my video got, my video got closed. Okay, let me just try to open. Okay, there you go. Hi. So how do you ensure perfection? I honestly don't think you can. There is no perfect product because let's say if you were a product, right? There's no perfect product. If you have millions of users, like Apple, for example, an iPhone, so many people want it. So many people pay huge sums of money for it. But even if you had your own iPhone that you paid for, you're still going to complain about it somehow, right? Or someone will love it, someone will hate it. So there's no such thing as perfect. So please do not aim for perfection. What I will encourage you to aim for is aim for a solution that solves the problem, right? So for example, if your career problem, now let's go back to your career. If your career problem is an economic problem, you hate your job because it doesn't pay enough. I mean, I'm just oversimplifying. Then make sure to find one that pays better. Or maybe it's about a combination of having a stable job, but having other, side gigs, side projects to fill in the gaps. And then it will never be a perfect solution, but it's a solution. If your problem is how do you pay the bills, and then what you currently have pays the bills, then you've solved the problem. But then if you have another problem, just make sure that you're solving the problem. And again, it's not about being perfect, but thank you for asking that question. Okay, there's so many more. Yeah, perfection is a work in progress. And really, who's perfect anyway? Nobody is. Not even your boss, not even the chairman. Okay, so I'm going to scroll again. And yeah, to Dana, you're just starting out in your career. I would really encourage you to be more intentional. Of course, it's never perfect. Sometimes you will get a job because it's the only job available, and that's fine. And when you're in a scenario where there are no other jobs, but you really need a job, I would encourage you, take the ones that are available, because again, you need to live. You need income to be able to live, pay the bills, etc. And you'll feel miserable if you're not able to have that. So at least have something that pays the bills. And then you can also prototype your passions, by engaging in side projects, volunteering for organizations. Your passion does not have to come from your job. That is too much to expect from a job, right? A job is there for you to do your best work and for it to pay you. If you feel passionate about it, that's a bonus. And I know I'm being a hypocrite by saying this, because I, for one, need to feel passionate about my job. But you think of your barometers. But yeah, think of the thing that you need the most. And if it's economic security, then go for economic security first, then find your passions elsewhere. You are an entire human being. You are not your job. And if you feel passionate about something else, then do something else, but do keep the job. Okay, I know we've really run out of time. So I'm gonna stop now, and I'm gonna let Jenny or Susan do the next steps. But thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much, Niña. I think that was absolutely inspiring, really inspiring. And as so many said in the chat, it was uplifting, because, it's exactly as you described, with sometimes I get caught up and we think about all the little details, we get overwhelmed by it. But as you said, it's work in progress. And that was really enlightening for me, I think for Jenny as well, and most certainly for everybody in the session. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your advice with us. We really, really appreciate it. And
thank you.
As Nina said, we will of course share the recording and her slides with all of you and with our wider community, because I think beyond the people that had time to join us today, there'll be a lot of people who are not in the session today who would tremendously benefit from the advice that you shared with us. So this will reach you in the next few days, so be a little bit patient with us as well. And once again, thank you so much for absolutely fantastic session. Jenny, would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I already knew that this was going to be an awesome session, because Nines is awesome. But I think what I appreciated as well was how active our attendees were and still are. I think that also keeps the juices flowing, right, for the speaker. So I hope that for all of you inside the room, you are not only learning but really applying all these things. And one lesson that I've, but Nines and I always talk about this, is that we can't be too hard on ourselves. We have to be a little bit more kinder to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You can't solve everything all at once. You're
Yep.
not a superhero, and even the superheroes have their faults, like deadly faults, right? So I think, to be kind to ourselves, and then to also to find our tribe. So find people who are also nice to you, who are kind to you, actually celebrate your success, to celebrate your wins, but also will be there when you stumble and when you fall. So that's a reminder that we have to keep on reminding ourselves. But Nines, thank you so much for today.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was, I think, the highlight of my really long day. Now I'm energized again. So thank you, Susan and Jenny, and also, of course, Weston behind the scenes. Thank you to everybody who participated and asked questions. So I will be sharing that information to the team, and I hope to stay connected with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a good evening, everyone.
All right. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.